You're listening to Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose, a new conversation space where educators and leaders explore what it truly means to lead with purpose, courage, and heart. Join Dr. Manley and myself, Jim Cummins, as we share the inspiration behind Lifted and how purpose-driven leadership can transform schools and communities. This is Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose.
When we founded Lifted, our goal was to support leaders through practical coaching, systems thinking, and meaningful leadership development. This podcast flows from that same purpose, creating space for leaders to reflect, learn, and be encouraged as they lead with purpose. Today's conversation is about one of the most important levers in any school system, the principal. We'll be talking about principal empowerment, accountability, the role of principal supervisors, and how district leaders can create the conditions for schools to thrive. Today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Erick Pruitt to the podcast. Dr. Pruitt serves as superintendent of Ankeny Community School District in Iowa. He began his role in 2021. His leadership journey is both broad and unique, both serving as superintendent. Before serving as superintendent, Dr. Pruitt served in multiple leadership roles in Chicago Public Schools and Houston ISD, including teacher, principal, deputy chief, area superintendent, and district leader supporting principals in schools. He has also served in the United States Marine Corps before entering education, which adds another layer to his leadership story and perspective. Across his career, Dr. Pruitt has been deeply involved in school improvement, principal development, strategic planning, community engagement, and creating systems that help schools better serve students. Dr. Pruitt, we are grateful to have you here today. To get us started, would you share a little bit about your leadership journey from Marine Corps to teaching and principal leadership to district leadership and superintendency?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me this morning. And so I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. That's where I was born and raised. After high school, graduating, decided to, actually in my senior year, decided to enlist in the Marine Corps. And so immediately after graduating, went to boot camp and began my service with the Marine Corps. One of the most invaluable experiences for an 18-year-old that really benefited me up until this day. While in the Marines, I had the opportunity to participate in two leadership officer programs while in the Marines, and I actually applied for it when I was on the USS Guam in the Mediterranean. And so during my tour on the USS Guam, applied for a program called Boost, broaden opportunities for officer selection and training. Was accepted and got an opportunity to spend a year in San Diego. Poor me.
Yeah.
With fellow Marines and sailors in the Navy for a year. And basically, it was a prep school for enlisted Marines and sailors who had an interest in becoming officers in their respective branches. But in order to become an officer, you needed to go to school. And so spending a year in San Diego, applied to Purdue, and was accepted to a program called MECEP. It allowed me to keep my enlistment while in the Marine Corps. MECEP is Marine Commissioning Education Program. So I was active duty Marine while going to Purdue University. Went to OCS. Unfortunately, by the time it was time to graduate, I was medically discharged, and then I had to start my career in education. And so I decided to start my career in Chicago. When I tell people my wife got 2 votes, I got 1, so we ended up in Chicago Public Schools. So just imagine this, I got discharged from the Marines in July and started as a first grade teacher in Chicago Public Schools. And so,
Wow.
that was a very interesting year, not only for me, but then also for those first grade kids that got me fresh out of the Marine Corps. Really enjoyed myself in the classroom, had an opportunity to teach obviously elementary, some middle school, and then had the opportunity to apply for a program called at that time, it was called New Leaders for New Schools, a national principal preparation program that allowed me to go to the University of Pennsylvania for a couple of months, so for some more leadership training, and work under a mentor principal for a year as a resident principal. Did that for a year, and then in Chicago they give 4-year contracts, and so I earned my first 4-year contract as a principal in Chicago Public Schools at O'Toole Elementary on the south side of Chicago in Inglewood. Really enjoyed my time with those teachers, those families. I thought we did some really good work improving literacy and math proficiency for those children, and then had an opportunity to become a deputy chief in Chicago Public Schools. And so worked under, at that time, his name's Dr. Sean Smith, was a deputy chief for about 3 years, and met at that time the superintendent in Houston, Dr. Terry Greer. He had a really good message about what they were doing in Houston Independent School District. And I wanted to expand myself as an educator, and see if what I was doing in Chicago could work in Houston. And so went down to Houston, um, worked with some really good people, had the opportunity to get promoted to area superintendent, as you mentioned, had the opportunity to work with some of the lowest performing schools at that time, and help them significantly improve. And then got called back to Chicago Public Schools, where I was able to work with some really talented high school principals. And then the superintendent and CEO at that time asked me to lead all the high schools in Chicago Public Schools. So I did that for, I believe, 2 years, and then got the call from a mentor actually about Ankeny in Iowa, and he told me to look at it. He thought that my leadership experience and experience both in Chicago and Houston would be good for this district based off of what that board at the time said that they needed. Applied. It was a good fit with me and the board, and it's been history for since 5 years ago. So really enjoying myself here in Ankeny as the superintendent.
I'm curious if you had those little fourth graders marching in line, and
So
I
I,
can't
I
imagine coming from the military to first grade classroom.
I hate to admit it, but discipline was a big part of my classroom management strategy. And so there were straight lines. They weren't marching, but everyone knew who my kids were at that school.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah. Uh, and just thank you for your service there
Yeah,
as
amen.
Thank
as
you.
Amen.
well. So we'll get into the focus. As you and I had talked early, and many things that we could talk about, but decided developing principles. And so one of the themes that stood out in that planning conversation was the importance of principles. And you talked about principal empowerment and creating the conditions for district success through principles. So talk to our listeners. Why do you believe principles are such a critical lever for school and district improvement?
I think it starts with my experience as a teacher. I think that the school that I went to wasn't low performing, but we had a really good school leader, a good principal, and that made a world of a difference for me as a brand new teacher. And then as I got more experience and moved to different schools, I saw that the impact of having a really good principal leading that ship was just invaluable. And then when I became a principal, I understood that my vision, my interactions, and more importantly, my relationships with my kids at the school and the teachers and all the adults that supported students in that school was invaluable. And so we all know the importance of having an effective teacher in the classroom. I think I just had firsthand experience from being a teacher, principal, and then principal supervisor that if you don't have a talented school leader leading a school, supporting teachers, supporting kids, no matter what goals that a principal or a district sets for itself, if you don't have a principal leading that school in a way that makes sense, you won't reach those goals. that they'll actually get in the way of teachers doing really good work.
Nathan talks about a lot when we're working with district leaders about the metrics that principals are measured by. And a lot of times principals want to live in that managerial world and not the interpersonal
Absolutely.
world. So as you talk to leaders out there that are evaluating principals, trying to make sure that they have the best principals in front of the students or the teachers, what advice do you give them as far as look fors in hiring and then training once they have them on staff?
Yeah, so part of the strategy that we've used here in Ankeny has been to ensure that all of our principals have a high quality principal supervisor. And so, we need really good principals, but we also need really good principal supervisors. And so for our superintendents that are in districts that might not be large enough to have that chain of command, it often falls on the superintendent. And so when you're looking for effective, high quality principals, I think the first thing you have to look at is their knowledge of instruction, their ability to go in classrooms and understand what really good teaching looks like, and then after they go in, how to give really good feedback. And feedback is often what are the questions you're going to ask the teacher to help them get to the answer they need to get to in order to change something that is going to benefit students. And so in the interview process is really, what are your conversations with a principal candidate, their ability to express and communicate what good teaching looks like, what do they look for as an educator going into a classroom, regardless of the content? And so there are going to be teacher moves that you're looking for. There are going to be student actions you're looking for. You're going to be looking at what's in the classroom. More importantly, you're going to be looking at what type of tasks are being assigned in the classroom. And then what's the role of the teacher? Are they the sage on the stage? Or are they the facilitator of the learning? So that all of that should come out in the conversation when you're interviewing a principal candidate with regards to how they plan on leading a school, but more importantly, how they plan on supporting teachers with improving their craft. And so the relationship part of it is, how are you giving feedback? Are you just telling people what to do,
Hmm.
or are you really thoughtful about the questions you ask? And it's not about you. It's about what do the kids need that this teacher is supporting, and what data are you using to back up the questions or the feedback that you're providing the teacher. So I think it's just not one thing that someone's looking for when they're interviewing something. There's a lot of different components that make really good principals.
And there's just so much there. So yeah, it just it and that principal piece I had to learn kind of the hard way pretty quickly is like they're just the linchpin for everything. You can have the greatest initiatives
Absolutely.
in the world, yeah, at the district office, and if your principals aren't on board and you're not directly coaching them, then success is really going to be you can't. For me, I thought, well, I'll go work with teachers because that's what I enjoy doing as a principal. And when I moved to that central office role, like your proximity's there not there enough, and so you
No.
really have to serve the principals so they can serve the teachers.
Yeah, the way I like to think of it here is that I have 18 different franchises that,
Hmm.
we have this common mission, common goal, and then each principal is the CEO of their own building that stays true to our mission, our vision, how we get there. I think there's some foundational things that we do as an organization that's going to be consistent across all schools. But then every school, as you know, is just uniquely different. The people, the kids, the parents. And so I can't handcuff a principal by saying you have to do this one thing or multiple things in this particular way and it not work for that community that they're serving. And so as you said, the principals are the linchpin because um, I'm not in the schools every single day. I would love to be. I'm not in the classrooms every single day. It's those principals, their leadership teams that are pushing the vision, the mission, the strategies that we're wanting to get to our teachers and to our students.
Well, I love how you talk about the CEO piece, and it really leads to this next question well. And you're talking about empowering as well. A lot of leaders talk about empowering others or principals, but that can mean different things. And some people may hear that and think it means leaving principals alone to figure it out. And so, what does that mean within that system? What does empowerment look like in practice for you?
So empowerment means that we're going to be using at the district office level, so the 100,000 foot level. We're going to use data to inform how we deliver support across the district. And then for the principal and empowering them, we're giving them the autonomy to make decisions that impact teachers and kids and it has to be based on data. And I think this is the big thing about leading principals and more importantly, supporting principals. We have to allow principals to make mistakes.
Mm.
We have to allow them to make leadership decisions. As long as we're not hurting kids or hurting our staff, they're going to make strategic moves that they believe in their heart is going to make a difference in the learning that's going on in every single classroom. And if it doesn't work, it has to be their idea. It has to be their strategy. Therefore, the principal supervisor can come in and truly coach around the strategy that they decided to implement that's connected to the district's goals. But then if it doesn't work, walk them through why it didn't work and not what we're going to do to change it, but what are they going to do to adapt and change their strategy to have a bigger impact or more of an impact on the kids that they're serving.
Nathan, before you go on, I want to get some clarification on an issue because this is a challenge that I faced. You talked about each of your 18 being a different franchise and having different unique needs, etc. One of the challenges that I faced, and I think other leaders probably face, is when you do that and principal A comes up with some great idea that gets press or has success or whatever, and it's just something that probably is not going to work in C, there becomes a little bit of, well, A is successful because they have X, and C can't be because we can't do that. How do you handle that little bit of tension that sometimes happens between principals or buildings in your
So,
district?
yeah, great question. I've always been of the mindset that creative tension isn't always bad, right? And so, and I don't think that we can copy, rinse, and repeat across our schools. And so, what we've done, or what my principal supervisors do, we bring principals together every month. We do a version of instructional rounds, and we have principals share practice. And this is where the principal developing their own strategy comes into play. They're listening to their colleagues about something that worked in their school. If we're coaching and helping our principals be self-reflective throughout the entire school year, that should cause them to think about what they're doing at their school. And this is where the principal supervisor comes in. Once we present at a principal's meeting or have a principal present about a practice that yielded results, the principal supervisor, because they know the principals that they're supervising, should be meeting with that principal who's struggling with something and making the connections about what they heard and what they're thinking about doing in their school, not telling them to do what school A did to get the same result. I've never seen that work because one,
Right.
we need principals to buy into their own strategy, not a strategy that someone else came up with. They may take a version of it, of what a colleague did and make it their own. That'll be much more impactful and powerful for them than it would be to just take something that someone did and copy it. I've never seen that work.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a great question and great insight and answer as well. I'm gonna go something else you mentioned there, and for your background in the Marines, if people haven't studied leadership in our military and they think everything's regimented, it's boom 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 boom, that's the only way. Um, and the connection as well to you had said you have to be comfortable with letting them fail. And that's going to make some of our listeners nervous, especially if they are a control freak, right? And
Yeah.
so if you can do it with your background
Yeah.
and make it successful, what would you tell that leader? And maybe how do you do that? Because I think that's where the learning takes place.
Yeah. And so there's a book that I read a while back. It's called Extreme Ownership.
Mm.
And part of that book talks about decentralized command. And so the premise around that is if I, as the leader, and I'm making the decisions for every leader in the district, when they experience a challenge and I'm not available, they're going to fail. And so this idea of decentralized command, if we build leadership at the lowest level and we're getting information down and they're getting information back up, we position our leaders in the classroom, at the school level, in our departments, and at the cabinet level to be able to make decisions absent of the CEO, the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and that's what we want. We need people to have faith in their ability in what they've learned in school, what they've learned in the classroom as leaders in a district, to trust their gut instinct and try something, try a strategy. And if it doesn't work, if we put our processes in place, they're going to reflect about what didn't work and adapt that strategy to help kids. And again, it's nothing. Failure isn't meaning that kids are going to fail. It may be a strategy failed, an approach with their teachers, an idea for kids maybe didn't go off as well. But it is never in harm of kids or the people that we're working with. We have to position everybody to be able to operate on their own because I'm not always going to be available. The principal supervisor is not always going to be available. The principal isn't always going to be available. And so we need to position the people that we're working with to be able to make decisions on their own. I think that makes the organization better. If I leave this district, I want them to. I think one of the things I would want them to say is, man, we have some really good leaders that have been developed, and anyone can step into a leadership role based off of the professional learning and development that has gone on during Erick's tenure.
I love the the book. First of all, the book is great, and would recommend it for anybody listening. Extreme Ownership, but I would also say that the principals aren't in a different situation than those firefights in Kabul that are
Absolutely.
talked about in the book. That's you certainly don't want to fail in that position.
Absolutely not. However, dealing with stress, dealing with angry parents, dealing with angry kids or staff, how we deal with stress in those situations is invaluable because the people that we're working with are looking at the leader around how they act in
Oh, yeah,
stressful situations. And so
100%.
oftentimes, if we don't act in an appropriate way, that has a trickle down effect around how people that report to me, who look at me, might handle different situations. So I think how we react to stress is what I take from extreme ownership because we're not dealing with firefights. We're not dealing with life and death situations in a school district. However, we are dealing with political issues that bleed down to the classroom, to the district, in our city, and how we deal with those stressful situations. If we're able to maintain, be even keeled, and make decisions that are in the best interest of kids, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah. And you're only going to do that through learning, practice, and reflection, and,
Absolutely.
and the coaching. It just and what
And the reflection part is, I think, the most important because I'm not an infallible leader, right? I think it's really important that the people that I work with on my cabinet hear me talk through mistakes that I've made. They help me go through after action reviews around
after.
decisions that have been made and what we could have done differently. What and me talk about what I could have done differently. If I'm modeling that in this role, I really expect people that are reporting directly to me to be doing the same thing with the people that they're working with, and down the chain of command and up the chain of
Up the
command.
chain.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned the reflection piece as well, because it sounds like we get so busy with the busyness, but it sounds like you've created space for reflection as well. Is that correct?
I would think so, but again, one of the things that we talk about in Ankeny is that we're a district of continuous improvement. There's always room for improvement, right? And
Yeah.
so I would think that we have systems in place that allow us to stop and reflect. But if I've done my job right, I'm going to have team members when we don't do it. That are going to tell me, hey, we need to stop and reflect on what just happened.
Oh, great. Well, and I love what you're doing here as well is modeling trust not only to your principals, but I imagine there's modeling trust to if you're going to give the principals the autonomy and the empowerment like you're talking about, which is very important, then every once in a while a parent or somebody may come in and chew you a little bit and being okay
Absolutely.
with I'm yeah, like, well, we messed up. We're gonna have to improve. And I got to see that model, but I imagine you're doing that same thing.
Absolutely. I think it's really important. I can talk to anybody. Parents email me, not all the time, but parents will email me. But I would, um, I think it's a detriment to a principal's leadership if when a parent emails me for me to make the decision for the principal because I'm not I have not experienced what the parent has talked about. And so it's imperative that when something happens in the classroom or at a school, that I push that back down and we follow that chain of command. And so let the principal struggle with that challenge, solve that problem, and if they can't, then we go to the principal supervisor. If they can't solve it, then we go to the assistant superintendent. And then if we haven't solved it by then it comes to me. But experience has shown that if we push it back down to our talented principals, 10 times out of 10, it's solved at the school level.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things there's a trust factor there, there's a confidence factor there. There are many things there, but one of the things that I've seen is it only takes about one time for you to usurp their authority and they quit taking ownership.
Absolutely.
Then they're picking up the phone. What do you want me to do? And that is not building them up and empowering them. So leaders that are listening that I would say maybe in the top 10 things of leadership, when your principal has an issue and a parent goes around you, the principal, if you want to lose trust quickly, answer that question for the parent or change the principal's decision. There have been a few times in my career where we reflected and we might do something differently,
Right.
but it usually came through reflection with the principal, not me just saying, "Oh yeah, that must be wrong." And
No,
I think you can gain respect with the parents by saying, "Listen, I don't know about your situation. We're going to have a conversation And if the conversation determines that maybe you could have done some things differently, then I think it's okay to say, hey, we might do this a little differently in the future, but our principal dealt with it the best they had at this particular time. Because it's like you said, it's okay to admit that we can do better, but boy, you can lose trust quickly by usurping a principal's decision.
Lose trust, and I'm getting in their way of growing as a leader.
Ah,
And I think the other part of it is I have to humble myself. Yes, I know what being a principal means. I've done that work, but I haven't been a principal for 15 years. The landscape has actually changed a little bit. I didn't have to deal with cell phones as a principal. That's kind of hard to believe 15 years ago, right?
yeah.
Not to the extent that we're dealing with them now or technology. And so, yes, I know what it means to be a principal, but I have to I have to trust that they know what they're doing. But then if we do make a mistake, then that principal supervisor comes in and coaches them through that. And then the principal supervisor is relying on that assistant superintendent to help them around how they might coach a principal through reflecting on a different decision that they should have made. But it's never in an attempt to demean or embarrass a principal about a perceived mistake. It's just what could we have done differently, and how will you use that learning to impact your decision making moving forward if this situation comes back up again.
I have to guess that's the same thing you want happening all the way down to a classroom level.
Absolutely. I don't what I've heard, I do office hours in all of the schools throughout the year. What I hear loudly, they don't want me, they want me in the classroom, but let they're the experts. Let teachers do the work. If they
Mm.
need help, they're gonna rely on their instructional leader, their principal, and their leadership team to help support what they're wanting to do in the classroom. So it's trust again, down and up the chain. I have to trust that the people that we've hired, we're hiring well, we're hiring talented people who know what they're doing, but we're also hiring people that are going to be reflective and think about how we can get better serving the kids here in our district.
But you're
Nathan,
also
you have,
very
oh, go ahead.
strategic. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
No, no, jump in there.
You're also very strategic and you're monitoring things. So you talked about it earlier with your data. You're
Yes.
bringing data to the table. And so, what are some of the data pieces that you're looking at to monitor all the strategy going on and what you're implementing here or what you've done here?
Yeah, so one of the things that so every principal has a building improvement plan, and so and then they identify, and we have our district strategic plan, and they align their goals to that strategic plan. But then my assistant superintendent, Dr. Ditmar, she has a dashboard where she's monitoring the actions that the principals have identified that they are working on through their building improvement plan. And so, of course, we're looking at academic data, growth and proficiency throughout the entire school year. But we're also looking at our culture and climate data. We're looking at our evaluation data, so discipline, attendance. We're looking at both student and teacher attendance percentages. We're looking at culture and climate data. This is our second year implementing an assessment through Culture Amp. I believe that culture is really, really important in a school district. And so listening to staff about how we might improve culture is data that we look at and monitor throughout the entire school year. In addition to the academic data, we have been very fortunate that we are a high performing district seeking to be the best district in the nation. And so it's not a shotgun approach to our strategy. We're at the point now where it's a scalpel. How do we support our kids with IEPs? How do we support our gifted and talented kids? How do we support those kids that are like right on the cusp of becoming proficient? Our ESOL students. We're at the scalpel stage of becoming a great district. And I think, we have a team here at the school and in the district office that have been up for that challenge.
I want to go back to one of the questions because it's always been um, an interesting leadership style. Is those in leadership that answer questions and those in leadership that ask questions. And it's district office, in our notes here, it says district office as support, not permission giver. And I think that just leads to um, talk to listeners about the difference between being somebody that solves all their problems and being someone that coaches them through the process of thinking. And you talked about even in our earlier, you mentioned you um, squelch their growth if you go around them. So talk about.
Yep. I think it's vital. Again, I keep coming back to the principals are important, but then also the principal supervisor is vitally important. And so I think that when I was a principal supervisor, it was really important that the principals that I was supporting knew that when I walked into their school, I didn't have all the answers, right? But they knew that when I walked into their school, they were going to get a lot of questions about what they're struggling with and what they're wanting to accomplish in their school. That's much more important around, and it actually helps you build actually a better relationship with the principals that you're supporting when they know that you're going to be a thought partner, a coach, but supervisor is low on the totem pole. It's easy to supervise people, right? It's easy to write people up. It's actually easy to fire people. But that's not the goal. The goal is how do I build someone up? And the only way I can build someone up is if I ask questions to help them think about their own thinking, about their own strategy. And so when I walk into the room and when the people here at district office walk into schools, principals should know that they're getting leaders who are going to come in asking questions and then listening for the support their principals need to do the work that they've identified for their respective schools.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But it sounds like the planning isn't so much in, I mean, the planning's really into the questions and the coaching,
Absolutely.
not
That's the hardest
into,
part,
yeah,
right? You don't want to ask leading questions where you're the person that you're coaching knows that you're trying to get them to a certain answer. That's where the work in comes in as a principal supervisor, but then also as a principal when you're coaching and giving teachers feedback. You've observed a lesson as a principal. You think you have an idea of what the teacher should have done differently, but you really don't want to ask the question that leads them to that answer. You want them to come to it on their own, and they actually may come up to an answer that you haven't thought about, right? And so the supervising principals, supervising teachers, identifying the questions you want to ask is probably more important than thinking about what you want to tell someone they did wrong, or what you want to tell someone what you think they should be doing differently. That's easy, and that's an easy out for the person that you're supervising because if it doesn't work, they're not going to blame themselves. They're going to blame their supervisor. But yet they hold all the accountability, right?
yeah, it's good. That's good. Jim,
You
where do you want
want
to go next?
well, we can go to. I'm curious to learn a little bit more. I've driven. I make a trip every now and then up to Minnesota. My daughter lived in Rochester for a little while, and now go up to visit Mayo occasionally. So we've been up through that area, growing area. Talk to me a little bit about the Ankeny community. You said they're wanting to be one of the best in the nation. So just talk a little bit about that. Um, there's probably some pressure on you to continue to raise that continuous improvement to get there. Sometimes leaders are leading in a low performing district, and the duty is to improve.
Yeah.
You're in a high performing district, and the expectation is still to improve. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the community and
Yeah. So I've worked in two great school districts before I came to Ankeny, Chicago Public Schools and in Houston Independent School District. Nothing bad to say about the school districts or the cities. Ankeny has been a breath of fresh air for me in the fact that I work with people both at the district office and in the schools who deeply care about our kids and our school district. And it's hard to explain. It just comes through in conversations, in our disagreements, the passion about our district. And our disagreements are often about what we believe is going to be in the best interest of kids. And it's rarely about the adult issues. It's about how can we do things better. And so I've been really lucky to have been able to work in a district where not only do I have really talented staff, but then this community really wraps its arms around the school district and are just very supportive. We have a very supportive business community, both here in Ankeny and in the metro. And to a certain extent, I've just never seen the type of support that this community um, provides our school district. It's been amazing. And so I think that is what I've been most amazed about Ankeny. It's I believe we're the sixth or seventh largest district in Iowa, but it still has that small district feel to me. And again, my experience is based off scale, and so going from 216, 350,000 to almost 13,000. This seems, really, this is a school district where I can know a lot of people. I can see, I know all the principals. Kids are now, they know who I am. The kids that were in kindergarten when I first got here that are now in fourth, or fifth grade. So those are the types of, and then the kids that are graduating, they know me. So those are the types of things that I really, really enjoy because, again, I'm coming back to relationships. This is a school district, a city that's really relies on the power of relationships to do what's best, not only for the city, but then also for our school district.
so I'm curious, what leadership lessons travel across all districts, all contexts?
Yeah, relationships. The- and you didn't ask me about this, but I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons from the Marines. Marines taught me how to work with anybody. And even those people that might be resistant, if you build a solid relationship by getting to know someone, getting to know what their goals are, getting to know what their strengths, growth areas are, and they understand that the actions you take are actually intended to help them grow. And that's not necessarily not being direct. Sometimes you need to give direct feedback, some candid feedback to people that you work with to help them change. And so I think the relationship part of it, I think also I took my team through some executive coaching about 3 years ago. And one of the most fascinating, they gave us, they showed us a chart around as you move up in an organization, you rely less and less on technical skills and more on strategy, relationship. And so in this role, strategy and relationship is where I operate. Whether it's working with my team, working with a school board, my God, that's relationships right there, right? And so I think leadership lesson for me is if the people don't think that you're going to run through a brick wall for them as the superintendent, as the principal, as their teacher, then you won't get the best out of them. And so I think that what you put into building professional relationships with the people that you work with, but also push them to be the best at what they do, is what people respect.
Good
That's
stuff.
yeah. Well, real quick, and it's not just that's best practice too. Because when we look at the competencies of what actually leads to positive student outcomes, number one is your ability, your interpersonal skills, and then you're strategic, and that's exactly the top two that you mentioned as well. And so,
Yeah,
even that is strategic, Dr. Pruitt. So,
yeah. If
Hey,
kids don't,
Nathan.
if kids don't know if kids don't believe that you care about them as a teacher, they won't give 50%. But if they think a teacher cares about them, understands, they see who they are, they know a little something about them, they'll go that extra mile. And it extends to your professional life. It extends to when you go to school or trade school or the military. We need people to believe in our ability to be better than who we are. And I think that that's what I strive to be in this role as superintendent, especially with the people that I work with. I want them to be better. If they move up in our organization, that's great. If they move up and then out, that's even better because I'm showing that's a living example of we're not holding people back. We want them to strive to be who they want to be and pursue the goals that they've set for themselves.
very good.
Hey, Nathan, before we go to well-being, why don't you hit 12? Because I'm interested in that one. Sounds like you
You
guys
know,
had a conversation.
okay. I'm glad you brought this up because uh, I I I was going to say something. Part of the reason why we our heart for the podcast is to bring light, um, not only best practices and just those good stories, the good leadership examples out there, and to be able to highlight school districts and communities and those leaders. And the challenge is, and you and I talked about this on the planning call, Dr. Pruitt, is you're very humble. And you were a little uncomfortable coming on here as we had first talked about it and said, well, it's going to be easier than you think because we're just going to talk about the great things that you do. And that was better. You were okay with talking about um, your staff and the community and those things and that ease that piece. And so
Yeah.
you might talk about that, but at the same time, I just want to highlight that piece for hopefully this has been a good experience for you, but that piece for other superintendents and leaders out there, like who are struggling with like bringing that light to that and telling that story and these great things happening specifically in public schools.
Yeah.
And yet, like, ooh, I'm uncomfortable with that. There are different avenues to do those things, and so
Yeah.
I appreciate you doing that. You can respond as well.
No, so I think that that's just how I was brought up, So I think the way I was raised is you let your work speak for itself.
Hmm.
And I'd much rather um, point out the great work of the people that work with me, our
Hmm.
principals, our teachers, than myself because they're the ones doing the hard work, right? And and it's almost like a sense of guilt where I feel guilty because I'm the one being highlighted for our district, but is really based off of the people that aren't seen. I'm just the face, and so I think that's what makes me uncomfortable because I'm a small part of what's going on here in Ankeny. It's the teachers, the principals, the paras, my staff, the district office folk that make this work here in Ankeny.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. That feel familiar, Jim?
Yeah, it does sound familiar, very familiar. And I think the thing I learned and more people talking about it was, yeah, but avoiding the opportunity to share the great things cheats those that are doing the great things from being seen because
Mm.
it's not often that they get the opportunity or the platform to go out and brag about the great things that are going. So you kind of, as the leader, you kind of have to be the mouthpiece. And if it's not really your the thing that you thrive to do is to go out and be in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to swallow it for the good of the team.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, that's what you've met my team member, Samantha. That's what she's told me multiple times.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
she's
well,
thrown me in front of the camera.
yeah, she's doing it. Samantha
Yes.
was a pleasure to work with as well. And really, Dr. Pruitt, I mean, I don't know how many people will see the video, and I'm sure they'll hear it through the most of our listeners listen to the podcast, not watch it. But you can't help but notice your passion and the gosh, it's your body language also just it speaks volumes and it says so much about your leadership and your personality as well, if
I'm
that makes sense.
I'm still having fun.
Yeah, good.
So I'm going to take that to our next question, which is we always kind of wind the show down with leadership well-being,
Yeah.
and we ask leaders to reflect on what they do to take care of themselves. You know, you sit in the seat, and you've sat in
Yeah.
big seats. There's burden, there's weight, there's a lot that rides on you daily.
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself centered? What do you do to take care of yourself?
Yeah. So it actually took me coming to Ankeny to actually start doing what you're asking. And so I didn't do a very good job of taking care of myself physically, mentally, when I was in my other districts, and that's my fault. It has nothing to do with the districts that I worked in. And so when I came here, um, because of the job and some of the stress that goes with the job, I noticed some bad habits creeping up. And so what I've been doing for the past 5 years, I exercise every morning. And most recently, I'm 1 year into doing CrossFit. And so I do CrossFit um, 3 times a week for the past year at 5 o'clock in the morning. And that makes me feel really good. I think the other thing is I've gone to counseling. And
Mm.
so because I'm the only one that's the superintendent in the district, I really don't like going home and talking about work with my wife because she's also an educator, and you just, I
Yep.
can't turn it, you can't turn it off, right? And so I started going to a counselor, and just in a counselor that specialized in executive leaders, where I could talk about the CEO superintendent issues that I deal with, and just work through strategies to deal with the stress, deal with the people, deal with the goals that I've set for myself, and the stress that comes with that, and that's helped tremendously. And so I wish I would have done that sooner. And there's a stigma about going to counseling, but it's been invaluable to me since I've been here in Ankeny, in addition to the CrossFit. My kids make fun of me that I've got a CrossFit family now. Yeah,
Oh, good for you. I
yeah.
mean, that's not easy stuff.
No, no. It's
Yeah,
fun though. It's fun.
taking you back to your Marine days. No, and
Yeah,
I appreciate you sharing that about counseling because I think, that's one of my passions is just the mental well-being and I think we've got to stop with the getting support is weakness.
yeah,
Because I mean you look across the corporate world, there's executive coaching going on everywhere. And what is the difference than going and talking to your counselor
Right.
about the stresses that are going on? That's a coaching level.
Yeah.
And people, we need to get rid of that stigma of that. So
There's
thank
been
you.
too,
Thank you.
yeah, there's been too many principals that I've known and that I've found out about that have died um, while in their school or at home due to stroke, heart attack, due to health, physical health reasons or just, mental health reasons. There have been superintendents whose health has deteriorated, and I couldn't let that be the excuse for why I wasn't successful as a superintendent here in Ankeny.
I lost one of my really, really good friends in the superintendency, took his own life several years ago, and it was impactful on me about, hey, you better keep things in line
Yeah.
because it can happen to anybody. He was a great guy, great guy. Nathan, you got anything else before we?
No, I appreciate the conversation, and I would even on that last piece, when the leader gets better, everyone else gets better as well. And so, you know, wrap it up for me.
Yeah, I'll do it. I just, Dr. Pruitt, I appreciate your time, your humble honesty, and just what you're doing there, and service to kids. So appreciate you taking time.
Thanks for the invite.
All right, I'll wrap us up. Dr. Pruitt, thank you for sharing your leadership journey and perspective today. The conversation is a strong reminder that district improvement doesn't happen by chance. It happens when leaders create the conditions uh, for people closest to them to work and lead well. Your reflections on principal empowerment, accountability, principal supervision, strategic alignment, that student-centered leadership are valuable for superintendents, district leaders, principals, and anyone working to build strong schools. To our listeners, we hope today's conversation encourages you to think about how your system supports the leaders who are closest to students and teachers every day. If your district is interested in leadership coaching, principal development, systems alignment, or professional learning support, Nathan or I would be glad to help and talk to you about what Lifted can do to partner in that work. So until next time, be well and keep leading with purpose beyond the bell.